I'm going to introduce them one by one with an abbreviated version of the biographies because you have them all in your programs. And I'll ask each of them to talk briefly as we begin our conversation. And then at the end of our conversation together, we'll be opening the floor for questions and dialogue with you. I'm going to begin with a congressman, because Congress is, of course, now considering legislation that we think could improve quality education in this country. But Congressman Holt has a much broader view than just this country. Just to give you the briefest introduction to the remarkable accomplishments of this man. He was a teacher, which is always a good place to begin when you talk about education. He was a Congressional Science Fellow. He was an arms control expert at the U.S. State Department, where he monitored the nuclear programs for countries that we would recognize by name. And from 1989 until he launched his 1998 congressional campaign, Holt was assistant director of the Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory. It's the largest research facility at Princeton University, and he conducted extensive research, including that he owns his own patent for solar energy device. I think we will talk about that perhaps at another time. But here's the point that amazes me about this man. Congressman Holt was a 5-time winner on Jeopardy! And so, Congressman, the category is education. What's the biggest challenge?
First of all, let me just say I'm really pleased to be with you all and to bask in the humanity and genius of the participants in this great forum. It is, you don't need to say to any audience that is imbued with the Jesuit tradition that education is the starting point, the ending point. It is, if we're talking about global development and human welfare, it is what we should be working on. And in the United States, we take for granted compulsory, universal, free education. But there are 75 million children, primary school age, who are one way or another excluded from schools. 250 million secondary school age. In many cases, it is because in those countries, there are fees for schools. So one of the things that I've been working on, that many have been working on, is to try to remove the fees from schools. Now, there are lots of things we need to do at the individual level, and you'll hear about some of the great things that others are doing. There certainly is a role for the government. There are 8 or 10 different agencies, government agencies, that are involved in education in other countries. Department of Labor, for the purposes of trying to keep down child labor. The Department of Defense and so many other things. But of course, USAID. The World Bank says to meet the needs for education for the children in the world will take about $4 billion annually. About $2 billion in just sub-Saharan Africa. When Kenya, when Malawi, when Tanzania did away with fees for schools, the enrollment jumped. In Kenya, in one weekend, they gained 1 million students. Now, obviously that caused disruptions in the school. It's been hard to sustain, but there are real improvements. Mm-hmm. And this can be accomplished with the encouragement and direct assistance from the federal government.
So the answer to the question is money, fees, population growth, or all of the above?
Well, you know, the best answer for healthcare, for reduced population growth, for general welfare is to start educating the kids. Right. In those families, birth rates decrease. In those families, life expectancy in the first 5 years doubles when the mother has education. Yeah. In those families, the economic well-being, participation in Grameen Bank, and that sort of thing, those all increase when the kids start going to school.
Right. We want to come back and hear more about your specific work both abroad and in this country, but you lead so well into Dina Habib Powell, who is the global head of the Office of Corporate Engagement at Goldman Sachs. And Goldman Sachs has, under Dina's direction, done some extraordinary research which points up exactly what you're saying, Congressman, and what we'll hear over and over again at this forum, that investing in education, in particular the education of girls and women, changes a country and indeed changes the world. And Dina's going to talk more about the Womenomics and Women Hold Up Half the Sky studies that were done. This is not some, educational think tank. This is Goldman Sachs, who chases capital markets around the world. And under Dina's direction has established an extraordinary program to ensure that certainly at the graduate level that women are getting a different kind of education. Dina's work is deep in this arena. If you read her biography, you know that she worked in the White House and she has been an advocate for the education and empowerment of women throughout her career. 10,000 women set up to actually prove this theory, that if you invest in the education of a woman, you have changed the potential not only for her and her family, but for her community, country, and indeed the world. Mm-hmm. How does it work?
Well, thank you so much, Pat. And I am also so honored to be here and join such a prestigious panel of really dedicated individuals. Congressman Holt asked me earlier, now, what's your connection to Georgetown and the broader Catholic community? And I said, well, I think 12 years of Catholic school should count for something. Pat very graciously just talked about some of the work that we are doing at Goldman Sachs, and I think it does absolutely segue perfectly from what Congressman Holt just said. I think that everyone in this room now knows that it is indisputable that the education, protection, and empowerment of girls and women around the world is the absolute answer to so many of the social welfare issues and development challenges, as Congressman Holt laid out. But what was interesting and has been interesting are these pieces of research that are now also beginning to find that the investment in women is absolutely the smartest investment if we want to grow global GDP. And I think that is something that is, there's some new voices on that. Our own research, McKinsey has had some very good research, Ernst & Young. Pat referenced two pieces of research, Womenomics and Women Hold Up Half the Sky, that actually found, very statistically, Pat notes that one time she told me, these weren't the fuzzy philanthropy types at Goldman, right? I said, no, these were the hardcore research types that found statistically enormous impact in investing in women. And of course, you all heard from one of my heroes, Muhammad Yunus, earlier, who I think also proved this theory, that you invest in women and you see an enormous return, not only on what does happen in their communities, but they return the loans that they have acquired. And what 10,000 Women does is it seeks to really build on that movement and others. It's investing in a stage of women who want to become entrepreneurs. They want to grow their businesses. They want to hire more people. And I'll just very quickly share one anecdote that we're extraordinarily proud of that I think shows both these pieces. There's a wonderful graduate of 10,000 Women in Lagos, Nigeria. She had a small catering company. She did not have a college degree. She worked out of her house, and she began to make meals for different individuals. Having graduated from the program, where she learned the basics that she just didn't know. She used to not have a bank account. She would keep her money in her bag. She used to employ 2 people some of the time. She figured out some basics, how to open a bank account, write a basic business plan, access some capital. Since graduating, Iome Bope has increased her revenues 500%. She has hired 5 full-time individuals and up to 25 temporary waiters. But I think what touched us in an extraordinary way was that her husband, who found her work to be a wonderful hobby, but that sometimes took away from the kids, is now cooking in the kitchen with her. Because he is seeing for himself, he's sitting on a very valuable asset.
There's profound social change.